Welcome to the second Talent Intelligence Collective podcast. I'm Alan Walker, and in this episode, me and my far more talented co-hosts, Toby and Alison, are joined by the awesome Sean Armstrong of Standard. If you like what you hear, please spread the word, leave a review, give us a rating. Your support is much appreciated. And also, please do tell us where we can improve. We want to deliver the best talent intelligence podcast on the planet, and can only do that with your input. Have fun! Before we get on with the main event, I just wanted to remind you that this podcast is proudly sponsored by our friends at Stratagens, and here's a very well-spoken chap to tell you a little bit more about them.
Stratagens gives HR leaders the data they need to transform businesses with the speed and ease required in today's world. If you're ready to make decisions that aren't lengthy, costly, one-dimensional, or based on gut feeling, visit stratagens.com. That's stratagens.com to register for a Wednesday demo drop-in and find out more.
So welcome to the second episode of the Talent Intelligence Collective podcast. Still a mouthful, still managed to get it out.
Yay!
I'm Alan Walker, amateur podcast host and professional, know nothing about the world of talent intelligence. Thankfully, I'm delighted to have with me again my co-host Toby Coulshaw from Philips and Alison Ettridge from Talent Intuition even. How are we both?
Very good, thank you.
Very good. Great to be here.
Excellent. As we're only at podcast number 2, I think we should do another quick round of intros. So, Toby, tell us a little bit more about who you are and what it is you do.
So I work at Philips, the big health tech company, and I lead our global talent intelligence and exec search research function.
And Alison?
I'm founder and chief believer at Talent Intuition, and I'm believer because I believe now is the time for leaders to use data-driven insights to help their businesses, which is why we built Stratagens.
I think by the time we get to episode probably 12, I'll have got used to you calling yourself chief believer.
Nah, never. I'll have called myself something else by then.
And just a note to anyone listening in, Nick Brooks from Microsoft will most definitely be joining us at some point as a third co-host for future episodes. But anyway, onwards. We'll continue to experiment with a few things during these first few episodes. So keep bearing with us, guys, if you're listening in. We're still a little rough and ready, and we're learning as we go along. To anyone that's listening, please do let us know what works, and of course, and probably more importantly, what doesn't work, either via the email address for the show or on the Talent Intelligence Collective Facebook or WhatsApp groups. So here's how the next 40 minutes or so are going to pan out. My intro, it's almost done with. Then Toby and Alison will talk us through some of the interesting happenings in the world of talent intelligence, news, views, movers and shakers, that type of thing. And finally, we're going to hit our guest, Sean Armstrong from Standard, with a barrage of insightful questions from Toby and Alison anyway, and some dumb questions from yours truly. So let's have some fun. I think first I wanted to crack on and introduce our guest for this. As I said earlier, the second episode of the Talent Intelligence Collective podcast. Sean, first, how are you?
I'm great.
Good.
Nice sunny day here in Hoboken, New Jersey.
Lovely. And secondly, who are you and what do you do?
I'm the Vice President of Talent Intelligence for Standard Industries. It's a global manufacturing company specializing in building materials, new energy, et cetera. I lead a relatively small team or a center of excellence based in New York that serves as kind of an in-house consulting and operational execution engine for the company globally, focusing on all the way from the executive level to customer service reps, technicians, et cetera. I'm mostly engaged right now at the senior level because we've retreated a little bit, but we'll be expanding throughout the year, everything from a globalized Workday ATS to shared CRM databases. And I've got about 25 years experience in talent intelligence and leadership consulting.
I've got about 25 minutes, so we're a good comparison. So, what's happening in the world of talent intelligence? Toby, anything cool out there? Anything interesting? Anything that I'll even slightly understand?
Well, there was a really interesting report by McKinsey earlier this month that was predicting that 22% of the global workforce activities, EU workforce activities, are going to be automated by 2030, which is it's quite terrifying. If I'm going to be honest, that reflects about 50 million roles at risk, which is huge. It's absolutely huge, and I think it's going to be fascinating to see over the next period as we shift through this kind of accelerated digital transformation, what we can do around reskilling, upskilling, and looking at that workforce that is displaced and how they can still be used within the broader workforce. I think it's a really interesting report. McKinsey obviously do some fantastic stuff, but the stuff that is around automation can sometimes be slightly terrifying, but I think it's a fascinating read.
I think it's quite cool, but I think there's something about it. They talk about workforce activities, I think I'm right in saying. So I think, and they do talk about roles as well, but I think we do need to be careful that we're not scaremongering, because I think there's something about breaking down roles into tasks and saying, okay, which are the tasks that can be automated? And why would we not want to do that for the tasks? And then how do we upskill? And how do we cross-develop people in order to make sure that we're focused on more human activities? So I think we need to take, it's like all of these reports, you kind of need to take them, yes, with some credibility behind them, but also to kind of question them as well and make sure we're not scaremongering.
I think you're right not to be scaremongering, but I think we also need to be kind of realistic about this stuff.
Yeah.
If the amount of work that needs to be done by humans is going to decrease, which I think there's no other way of looking at it, it's got to happen, isn't it, in some way, shape or form. I think the way we look at work has got to be done completely differently. And the amount of work maybe that each individual needs to do will have to reduce to make sure there's enough work to go around in the future. I think people keep talking about it's okay every time there's a revolution in terms of technology or industry, there's more jobs that are created off the back of it. I think the eternal optimist in me likes to think that will happen. But I think the realist in me says I can't quite get my head around the logic how more jobs will be created, because lots of people in this automation and tech space claim that will happen. But I can't see that myself.
I think Sean will be able to comment on this related to some of the new energy pieces that Standard are involved in. But I remember we're creating new industries the whole time, and I think that for me is where we need to be careful. I was talking to a business a couple of weeks ago. It's really cool. So they are looking at how we use drones for home delivery. So this is a great example of a change in role from a delivery driver to a drone. But what they were saying is that they will use the flat roofs of filling stations, does that make sense, as the kind of depots. And then what you need is you still need people in the depots kind of taking the stuff, figuring out where it needs to go, making sure it ends up in the right place, taking it off the drone. So it's a shift in work rather than, that's it, that job no longer exists and there will never be something else that those people can do.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it pans out. Hopefully, the universal income thing it's getting bandied around more and more and more, doesn't it, at the moment? And probably partly inflated because of the crisis we're going through. But I think it's been on the agenda for a while now, and I wonder whether that stuff will be accelerated.
Yeah, it could be. And actually, that leads into one of the other pieces of news, which is Japanese firms are beginning to test AI tech to recruit talent. And particularly, there's a director of recruitment at SoftBank who was saying that they had managed to cut the total labour time in screening applicant resumes by 75%. That's enormous in terms of the impact that could have on talent acquisition. But again, I was talking to someone else earlier this week that was saying that that's going to really impact on neurodiversity, never mind diversity, because nobody really is training the AI around neurodiversity. So it's a really you either embrace this. It's like chief believer as a job title, right? It's Marmite. You either embrace it and love it, or you go, I'm going to ignore that and pretend it's not happening, and kind of look at it through a different lens.
Oh, absolutely. It's I'm not a TI expert by any stretch of the imagination, but tech is my thing, and I think embracing it has got to be the way forward, because otherwise, if you don't understand, you can't then decide what to do, can you, or how to react to it. And I think you have to, absolutely. And the AI piece around screening has been been a controversial point for a fair while, hasn't it? I think done properly, it can be an excellent tool. It can be much fairer than human beings can be, because it can be super objective. But it's got to be built properly. It's got to be monitored in the same way humans' decisions are monitored, because it can run amok and actually lead to you making a bunch of biased decisions far faster than a human would make those biased decisions. And by the time you realize it's happened, you're like, oh, bugger, where are we? How do we fix this? So it's got to be, we've just always got to be careful, haven't we, but understand things and get our head around them.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you think that the AI piece, though, is AI and assessment in terms of taking all these screenings of CVs and looking at the human behavior and then replicating at scale? Do you think we're doing what HR and TA like to do generally, which is to use tech to replicate existing processes without necessarily thinking, are they even the right processes we want? So when I look at tech, I think comes back to your point earlier, Alison, around actually it's the skills we want. And if we're training tech to assess a CV, when in fact what we should be doing is really investing in the tech that's going to assess the skill set, so that we're getting the right skills brought to the table, rather than being able to review CVs really effectively and bringing them to the table.
Absolutely,
1,000%, even if there is such a thing, which there isn't.
Do you know what? He doesn't say much, but when he says it, it's pretty insightful, isn't it?
It does. Yeah, it's almost. We always say to people, there's no point bringing in tech and automating an already naff and fairly ineffective process, because all you end up doing is making that process faster. It's still naff and ineffective at the end. You just get to that point quicker. You should be looking at tech of actually enhancing and improving what you're doing and looking at doing things differently. And skills is a great example of that. Again, another thing we've all been talking about for years is, should the CV die? Is it time for it to go away? And we stop worrying about the CV or the work history or the LinkedIn profile and that kind of thing, and concentrating on the abilities of the individual, be those kind of soft or hard skills. But many organizations still haven't nailed that. And they go with the CV as the first port of call right at the top of the funnel. And by the time you start looking at soft and hard skills, you've already filtered out a bunch of people who may have had those in abundance because of what is or isn't on their CV. What are you doing at Standard, Sean, in the space?
Well, one thing I was thinking about, if there was a secret video that got posted of some of the fights I've had with my technology being sequestered alone for 4 months with my robot vacuum, Alexa, you'd realize that AI have a 200 plus IQ and 0 EQ. It has no empathy. It can really be maddening. And all that does is underscore the point that we need human connection, probably more than ever. And we can kind of get into that theme a little bit more. But that's one thing that really, in all this time left to introspection, that we really need to connect with people. And that's where recruiting, retainment of employees, engagement, all of that is about human connection. I haven't come across a machine that can do that.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that you talked about kind of pre-show, is that you see this emerging new leader who's kind of got different skills because they recognize talent as an asset. And I was really interested in exploring what you thought the skills were that were kind of associated with that.
Yeah, I think this is a backdrop. I'll just throw out something a little bit provocative. If you mandate physical distance, social distance is not an option. Social distance is a misnomer. I think that was brought up by Vivek Murthy in a book called Together. I think when an animal gets separated from the herd, our entire being is sort of consumed by trying to get back. So we're in a period of rewirement to a completely new world. Everything from everything's different. The way we eat. I've been cooking food where I hadn't done that before. Where I live is merged with where I work. Even what we belong to. And if you're kind of working up Maslow's hierarchy all the way to who we are as ourselves. And I think that that's what a lot of leaders, our role in the world, leaders are standing back and saying, okay, I told all my employees to go home and didn't allow them to, or didn't tell them when they could come back. It just said, okay, you're on your own. Figure out how to reconnect with the company. That's a little bit of extreme because companies did start the wheels turning and working very hard to reconnect with employees, but it's entirely new. That's why I call it rewirement. We need to reconnect in ways that we never were able to do before. So leaders need to think of things like as if you're in the talent recruiting business, location, what does that mean anymore? The talent market is now frictionless. I could get off this call and do an interview right now with nothing, no change in schedule, no travel, nothing involved. And I'm also in this period of sort of thinking about my role in the world. So I'm going to be very open to a recruiter calling me about a new opportunity, because what do I have to lose? So it's a really, really interesting time with a lot of potential movement in talent, casting away stigmas, like where we, in the executive search business, if you see someone that's temporarily out of a job, you just set them aside. I think that's got to be rethought, among other things.
And you're talking in a language that Toby and I and Alan will learn to, but Toby and I talk about all the time. We'll bring him on the journey slowly, Sean. But I think it's fascinating. And Mark Zuckerberg talked about anybody being able to work from anywhere for Facebook, but he then said, "But I'm not going to pay them the same salaries." And I think there's this whole debate that's going to come up and wallop us that says, if in theory the talent market is frictionless and people can work from anywhere, do you pay people for doing the same job regardless of their local economy? I think that's
it has to do with what you identify with. You're going to identify with a brand as opposed to a company that writes you a paycheck. So people will have more of an element of free agency. If Mark Zuckerberg wants to pay you less, then he has to allow you to go work on the side for another company.
Yeah. I think it's like everything is kind of being thrown up in the air, and it's been thrown up in the air in such a short space of time. Toby, what are we hearing in the Facebook group over pay? Is there any kind of chitter chatter on that?
Yeah, so there's been quite a lot of talk around the pay and how people should be paid differently in different regions, or if they should, and the debate around that. It seems to be there's an average consensus that the pay for a job should be the same, or the output for a job should be the same, but then with local variance overlay. I think personally, I could debate myself either which way, whether it's interstate within a country or looking global. I think you could really make the case for it's the output of the work you're looking for, and where that's done is up to the individual, particularly when you're tying into things like people wanting to be digital nomads, etc. How do you assign that pay? It's very much around the output-driven piece. So I think that's going to be a really interesting selling point for companies as we go forward. I think it also ties into Sean's point around the stickiness of a company. If you're at the end of a laptop now and you're not going into an office every single day, you're not seeing your teammates every single day, you're not eating in your canteen every single day, I think it's really going to challenge the stickiness of people to companies. And I think I was having a conversation with somebody about whether people will feel as tight to a company as they do historically and currently, whether they're going to be tied in as much, or is it simply you're closing the laptop screen at the end of the day and you could be working for any of the big tech companies. And so suddenly you don't have that loyalty that you once would have had, and you don't have that stickiness. So are we going to see that further pushing this whole kind of fluidity in the marketplace and people having a much, much more fluid career, and the attrition rates going higher again?
I think
surely that should be. Sorry, Sean, you go.
So people will join and leave companies partially because of the brand, but more often because of their leader. And this kind of loyalty to leader is going to change the style as well. People might be more willing to move as a group to another organization, or just follow a leader from more like the movie business. You're just kind of going project to project because of a great director, for instance.
No.
That makes sense, absolutely. And ultimately, it will make workplaces better. If organizations know that people are likely to be more flighty, it'll make leaders better as well. If people know people are going to be more flighty, they'll do more to keep them. They'll make the environment, whether that environment is them working from home or a more physical office presence, they will improve that. They'll improve jobs, they'll improve everything that goes around it, because they know that people will move at the drop of a hat in the future. And also on the pay thing, I think market forces will dictate the way that will go ultimately. If you're able to hire a developer in San Francisco on $300,000 a year, or a developer in London for $100,000, then you may go, okay, well, we want to go and hire the $100,000 one because they're just as good, but it's going to cost us less. But over time, those salaries in the cheaper market, so to speak, will increase, and the salaries in the other market will decrease as supply and demand changes. So there'll be a great global balancing, I think, which would be great for everybody. It might not be so great for those that have earned a fortune in certain cities in the past, but it will be much better for the rest of the world because there'll be a shift of finances, a shift of money that will eventually help everyone, I think. Maybe that's me being a big softie.
No, I'm with you, but I think that creates then a massive shift in cities, because that fundamentally changes the cities, and completely borderless places. What's the impact on real estate? What's the impact on residential property? If you don't have to be in the same place, and you're not going to get on a train or a tram or and commute every single day. But also, I think it's I've kind of got this niggle that's going through the back of my head all the time that says everything that we're talking about makes utter sense for those roles that can be done in that way. There's still a whole bunch of roles where you've still got to go into a physical environment and you've still got to do things in a certain manner. And I think it's quite easy for us to get excited about what will happen with your great global balancing. But actually, what about the other work? What about the task where people are going into a physical place? And I think that's pretty tricky.
It's a really good point, but actually even that those roles could improve for people, because even if the salaries don't exponentially increase, if things like real estate starts to look more realistic in the big cities because less people need to live there, therefore the cost of living decreases, actually people at the lower end of the spectrum, which generally are those people who have to go into a physical place of work, be them retail workers or hospitality or whatever they might be, actually life becomes a damn sight more affordable, because suddenly buying that flat in London that's one bedroom and is pokey as hell, it doesn't cost £600,000 anymore. Maybe it costs 300, so it's more realistic for you to be able to achieve that.
Yeah,
there's the counterpoint to that, though, Alan, that with the de-urbanization, the people that are on the higher salaries moving out to, say, the quieter areas, then raise the cost of living there and raise the house prices, etc. there. So the people that you mentioned, the lower salaries in the non-urban areas, could then be forced out. And so,
possibly.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of a period of cleansing in a way, as we're sort of rethinking all this. And you can't really bypass health and wellness and diversity and inclusion too, and sort of thinking about the whole person and their relationship with an employer and their profession. In health and wellness, companies are really doing more serious thought about what the return on investment is in mental health programs, for instance, that will in turn lead to longer term savings in healthcare and leaves of absence, et cetera. And diversity and inclusion is under a huge microscope in the States and around the world. And I think, my sense is that companies we're in a situation right now with everybody sort of thinking about the world in a new way, that we're really looking at diversity and especially inclusion. How is this environment that everybody's coming back to going to be inclusive for all types of people from all walks of life, all ethnicity, gender, and as well as people that may have a real case of PSTD, for instance, PTSD from the trauma of this incident, or how can they get out of a situation where they've got children in their workplace and they're moving back. So it's just and it really is all about making a workplace inclusive and productive for everyone.
And so on that, because I think you're so right, on that, what do you think are the questions that leaders should be asking their talent intelligence teams right now, bearing in mind that we are throwing the whole world up in the air? What do you think are the key questions?
Well, I think are you looking at it's an old analogy, but the whole iceberg. So you've got what you see in a person. They're a productive employee. They're rated highly in their output and their work. They're respected, et cetera. But below that, they've got all these personal challenges, differences, abilities, a whole life that a lot of people really kind of kept separate, and you can't really do it because a lot of things are happening in the world anymore. So am I looking at a whole person? Is my organization treating people as whole people as opposed to, just sort of the tip of the iceberg?
And it's quite refreshing in some ways, isn't it, to kind of not have to have different personas. So that's what I find. It's kind of like, there's something refreshing about just going, this is me, and kind of take it or leave it, which just wasn't there. You couldn't have done that 6 months ago. There was still this kind of, this is my professional persona and this is my home persona. What do you think? What about?
Go ahead.
Sorry, go on.
I mean, it's really, there is a lot that there are things that people are still a little more closeted about, like mental illness, but there are personal experiences. People are just completely out there right now about kind of racial issues in the US. And whether it's work or not, there's always Facebook is for your personal life and LinkedIn is for your work life. That's merged quite a bit lately, more than in the however long I've been on LinkedIn. So that could be a good thing or a bad thing, but it's up to leaders to push it in the direction of good.
Guys, I think we could chat about what's happening right now in the world all day long. In my mind, it's so interesting. But I really want to drill down into Sean a little bit more. That sounds weird. I definitely want to know more about him, and I think it's time we hit him with those barrage of questions that I mentioned earlier in the show. And as I am in charge, and as you mentioned earlier, Alison, I can mute anyone. I'm going to go first, and because I can ask a low-hanging fruit type question as well. So. Since we started this podcast, I've continuously told everyone, I keep banging this drum, that I know nothing about TI. I may be doing myself a bit of a disservice there, but generally I don't know what a day or a week in the life of a TI leader looks like. And I think some of our audience who are new to this world won't either. So what does a typical working week in Sean Armstrong, talent intelligent leader's life look like, Sean?
Well, there's right now, and then there's in normal life, and then there's the future. So I'll say, right now, what's kept me going with this for so long, I was originally a journalist, and what drove me into that field was having something new every day to learn about, being able to interact with people. My favorite thing ever was writing profiles in journalism, because you get someone to talk about their job and what they're about, kind of like you're doing to me right now. And so that's what, like, getting information on people, how they work together, organizations, et cetera, is the core of it. So typical day, I'm an early starter, so I'm usually reviewing what's going on in the news. There's always something relevant. There's just something in the Wall Street Journal today about workplaces and how they're being rethought. Whether it's, half home, half workplace, et cetera. I think once we kind of get that together, I've built in the past year and in my prior life, always worked around a shared CRM database, which is CRM is customer relationship management, but we've kind of morphed that in the talent world into candidate relationship management or talent relationship management. But essentially, the relational database that's an engine for how we operate. It captures all the information, the inflow of information that as recruiters are out in the field and they're talking to candidates and they're talking to them about companies and trends, all of that goes into the database, and we can parse and organize it and develop sort of meaningful intelligence around an industry or around a function within industries. All of that kind of needs to be managed. So I have a team of analysts that keeps that data quality going. So then we kind of break down what the output is. Right now, a lot of what we're focusing on is using a database that was launched in February and running a couple of high-profile searches. We backed off a little bit on our search work for a couple of months, but we had a couple searches that we really needed to, senior level, SVP level searches that we needed to have, largely around the regulatory area, where we were very fortunate to have our factories in 40 different countries be deemed essential businesses. So we only had to slow down. We didn't have to shut down. So we need to keep that position within all the different governments, and especially the U.S. federal government, so that we can continue to be a part of the solution. We are a building material company. We're in a company that's in a rebuilding phase, so there's no reason why we shouldn't be a key part of the solution. We all need to think about that as employees of the company. So that's the kind of the backdrop. What's this mean? I read this article in the journal. What's that mean for us? There's a lot going around AI. We have a newly built digital operation that flies drones to survey roofs, and then we have all kinds of big data applications around usage that we're doing. So there's about 50 different types of subject matter that could come through in the daily news that's highly relevant to us. down and dirty search work is really about finding candidates, reaching out to them, assessing. I think I would say, based on our earlier conversation, that since it's all virtual now, it's very interesting that we can kind of punch above our weight class as far as the type of people we can get to sit down and talk to us about their jobs, because there's not as much friction around it. So that's been really beneficial, both in our ability to capture market intel and also to be able to get people to the table, to recruit into leadership positions. Then the other part of the job really that was paused, but now we're in the second half and beyond, we're starting to move more into. We have a very active investment and private equity organization. We're working with them to do due diligence around potential acquisitions, around board governance, et cetera, where we can get real kind of market data on individuals that are involved in the leadership of companies that we own or might acquire. In addition to, we have a security operation that does the same kind of thing for our executives. We need to be able to dig in another layer sometimes around the safety. If we're going to start a plant in Abu Dhabi, do we know what other companies are there and what are they doing around security? So we're sort of a information nexus for the company that's getting more and more broad reach. That's sort of the more groundbreaking part of what we're doing. And then the more sort of mundane or fundamental infrastructure is we're building what will eventually be an integrated talent information platform. So we have Workday did a phase 1 rollout. We're going to phase 2, where we're going to be expanding the use of Workday Recruit as a system of record for all of our organizations. Then we're rolling out the yellow platform for our volume recruiters, which will integrate with Workday. Then we have the Encore platform that we're using at leadership level. We're using the same playbook, the same governance, the same data standards across platforms so that we can work in a unified way. That's
nice. So lots going on. That's Monday. What do you do for the rest of the week?
Anytime I'm not doing this, I'm usually on a bike or a sailboat.
Oh, fair enough.
Both great places to be. I'm sorry, you've had your question, Alan. Unless you mute me now, I'm going to ask another one. When what you might do now, when we asked you to come on the show, Sean, you said that you felt that this is the time when TI truly becomes a vital advantage for companies. And you're talking now about kind of the more cutting edge and groundbreaking stuff that you're doing. How do you think that TI will play out in the future?
I think I had my first mentor in executive search research. Her name was Claudia Peachy Morris. She's kind of a legend in executive search. And, she said, think that no matter what is the way that anything is calculated, just always think of research, which is now becoming referred to as talent intelligence. Think of it as a profit center for an organization. It should be driving revenue in one way or another. And whether it's accounted for in the balance sheet or not, you need to think of it as a way to drive your business results. And I think that kind of going back to what I was referring to before, people are starting to see things like diversity and inclusion as a real business problem with a real business return. So how do we play a role in that, in sort of tracking pipelines of talent along diversity lines, on making sure that talent's making it through to the interview stage and hired? We have a huge role in being able to facilitate that.
And I think one of the pieces that I noticed you say earlier, and it comes into that return investment and the value add pieces, particularly around the M&A assessment. And I know we do a lot of work in the M&A space for our TI team here at Philips, and it's a service offering that continues to develop and it continues to evolve. But I think if you look at the success rate of most M&A across industries. And Alison, I know you do a lot of work in this space as well, but it's so low as a success rate. And bringing TI into that to try and de-risk that process and try and improve the success rate, I'm finding a really, really strong way of proving that future value creation and of the research center.
I have a case study for you. I worked on I think it was about a $40 billion failed acquisition, and I was on the people assessment team. So I don't want to name the company, but we could talk about it as a case study. It really was about the people. Because if you start to, you can crunch all the numbers, the investment bankers will do their part of it. When you start to integrate staff from leadership down, you don't get a point where you've got some connections at all levels around brand, culture, et cetera, it'll fail.
Yeah. We used to talk a lot about, kind of if you bang two companies together, and if you're a big corporate and you're buying a small business because you want to drive innovation in your business, if the first thing you do is say, right, we make decisions around a board table, then the people who've been part of this innovative, kind of fast moving business who've made decisions around a coffee machine are going to go, what? Where the hell does that come from? That's a massive cultural difference. It's a really simplistic way of describing it, but it's exactly right. It's exactly to your point that you can assess the people's qualities, but you need to nail the culture and how you bang those two things together in order for any M&A work to be successful.
And it's going back to the theme of assessment. This is jumping around a little bit, but it's really huge for us right now that we don't get to meet candidates in person. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if there's really, anyone's really cracked the code on that yet, but it's a challenge. And sort of all, setting aside all your previous biases around needing to be in the same room with someone before you hire them is really a big challenge. And I think that goes back to the M&A thing, where I don't want to buy a company without getting a real good sense of the people. Mm. How can you do that when you can't meet them across the table?
Yeah, so true. You talked about a book as well. You talked about parallels between talent intelligence and a book, The Big Short. And I haven't read it, but I think I'm right in saying that that's the book that Toby's bound to have read it, the book that looks at the role of different players in the financial crash and the impact on the housing bubble and kind of how it. Toby, have you read it? I'm describing it really badly.
I've read it.
There you go.
I watched the movie. Does that count?
Yeah, I watched the movie. Yeah, so I watched the movie, but I was thinking I'm probably looking at it from the wrong angle. But you talked about that in terms of TI. So you and Alan can come at this with a position of kind of more information than I can. Why is that
a shocking and appalling memory? But I remember I think it was written by a guy called Michael Lewis. Is that right? Yeah.
So how? I guess that there's a question in my head that says, how is that inspirational to a TI leader? And I'm trying to get my head around that.
Part of it is the way people react to changes. When prior to 9/11, I was working at a search firm, and we started a survey study on Wall Street bankers and what their values were, and it was really about their personal values and their work values. And during this survey, 9/11 happened, and we redid the questions with this Wharton professor, Peter Capelli, said we need to resurvey and see how it's changed. And I was ready for some big headlines, and it turned out that they didn't change at all. All they cared about was making money. So it was, there are different people that have different, and Wall Street happens to attract people like in The Big Short who will, they're very Machiavellian about making money. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. They can keep the world running, and, the people care about different things. But I think this time is different. I think everybody, even if they're kind of all about the buck, they're thinking differently than like The Big Short. I don't know if that scenario could even play out right now. Mm-hmm. But it'll be interesting to see, The Big Short post-COVID, would that change? I guess the closest example would be the show Billions, where you've got Bobby Axelrod, who's sort of a Machiavellian character, but becomes more human throughout the series. So maybe that's it. I'll have to ponder that a little bit.
It's fascinating, that world, isn't it? I was reading something about Warren Buffett's business, Barks something Hathaway. I can always forget the name, but anyway, his investment business. Everyone will have heard of him. Apparently, in January this year, they exited all of the airlines that they were owners of, or part owners of, or had a significant stake in. And it was, how did they know what was coming? They've reacted massively, to stuff that was happening in December in China, and thought, this is going to hit the world. That's smart, isn't it? As much as anything. But not everybody's got that smartness or that resource available to understand that is likely to hit the world.
The other thing about Warren Buffett's the most astute, successful investor ever, but he gave away all his money to Bill Gates. So to the Gates Foundation. So, it says something about his motivation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he's without a doubt a good guy in a world where many might not be perceived. They are that many good guys. I'm sure there are, but Warren Buffett definitely stands out. He gave something like 99%, didn't he, of his money to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Yeah. It was incredible.
And I think just a quote that you could apply to today's leadership that Warren Buffett uses: "It's only when the tide goes out that you know who's been swimming naked."
God, may the tide not go out.
Thankfully, this is a podcast rather than video. No, it's a really, really good point. We did a session with a bunch of employer brand leaders a couple of weeks back, and they were saying that the times like this, when you really understand what your employer values and what's important to them, and you see the wolf suddenly coming out of the wolf in sheep's clothing, and you see your employer for exactly what they are like and what they really value. And sometimes these times are very cleansing, aren't they? And you hope that they go some way to improving the world.
We had a conversation, and I'd like Sean's view on this. Toby, I think you spoke to the same business, but I had a conversation with a global FMCG who were talking about setting up a TI function from scratch. And it was quite interesting because they wanted to know what should they aspire to. So it wasn't kind of what do we do here and now, but it was much more to do with this, if we're a profit center in an organization that drives business results, what should we be aspiring to? And Sean and Toby, actually, I'd love to hear your views on that.
Yeah, I think it really is about putting, whether it's monetary or not, a measurable value on what you're delivering. I've said sometimes you think of research right now, and it's actually quite sad. The large executive search firms have been forced to really wipe out a lot of their research departments. And you can't really, if you're thinking of it at sort of old school overhead function, you're never going to get to the point where you can call yourself talent intelligence. So if you look at how you can actually be more of the tip of the spear and driving and being in front of your recruiters, your talent management people, and other areas of the business that need to look at talent intelligence, then you're really kind of winning the game. I always again, we're talking about investments. If you think about, everybody kind of has mutual funds in their 401k. If you have a bond fund or an index fund that just kind of follows the market, that's a way to think about talent. And some companies can survive that way. But if you want alpha, if you want to beat the market, at least in some functional areas, you have to take an entirely different approach. So if you say, we're all about having the best talent in AI, digital platforms, marketing, and sales, you can't get by just kind of hitting the index. You need to beat it. And that's what talent intelligence can help you do.
I think I'm going to take that as the quote for the podcast. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I completely agree with Sean's point. Just as the last point for me is, I think it's important to know what the value that you bring to the business. And the reason I say that is I was having a conversation just earlier today, in fact, where a leader of TI function was concerned that the work they were doing was too operational. It was operational intel, looking very much at a requisition level, and they were concerned. They were looking at other companies doing moving through to sort of tactical intelligence, looking 3, 6, 9 months out, through to strategic intelligence, looking 12, 36 months out, really impacting the business, M&A, all that sort of sexy stuff, as it were. And they were really concerned that they should be doing all that stuff and that they weren't adding value. But when we were talking through it, what they were doing was massively important to their organization. The scale they were talking around this operational intelligence was vast, which meant the strategic impact they were having was absolutely massive. It's just they hadn't framed it in that way. They hadn't realized the impact they were having at scale. All they saw was the type of activity and seeing it as transactional rather than as strategic value add. And I think that's one thing to really keep in mind is having an impact to your business, being that profit center or value add center. It's not to do with the output type of work. It's around how you're actually impacting the business.
I think TI leaders really have to be good salespeople and sort of at the high end, like a great McKinsey consultant who brings in a lot of business. We need to really sell and frame, like you said, frame the concept and frame the impact that we can have.
Absolutely. Listen, guys, I think we could quite clearly chat to Sean all day long. Absolutely fascinating stuff, but we do need to stop at some point. And 45 minutes-ish feels about right to me. I wanted to thank each of you, Alison and Toby, as ever, for co-hosting this, our second Talent Intelligent podcast, the second of many. Sean, huge thanks to you. You've been immense. I hope the experience was a positive one for you as well.
Yes, it was great. Thank you.
Good. And to our audience, we've definitely got one now. A huge thanks for listening, and see you all on the next episode. Cheers.
Really insightful. Thank you so much, Sean.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Before you go, I wanted for the last time to remind you about our generous sponsor, Stratagens. Here's that posh chap again, telling you about their fabulous product.
Stratagens gives HR leaders the data they need to transform businesses with the speed and ease required in today's world. They've done the hard work of analyzing thousands of external data sources so you can answer questions on skills, diversity, and real estate. Stratagens enables quicker business decisions about workforce and workplace in a way that is refreshingly simple and revolutionary in its logic. If you're ready to make decisions that aren't lengthy, costly, one-dimensional, or based on gut feeling, visit stratagens.com. That's stratigens.com to register for a Wednesday demo drop-in and find out more.